Well, Mark Carney goes on another podcast that is run by one of his friends, which seems to be the way that he goes about trying to reach the public. He doesn't want any scrutiny. He won't deal with independent media that he doesn't actually know. Pure Poilievre answers in a way that I don't believe Mark Carney has the capability to respond to, and he certainly wasn't prepared for. Welcome to the Canadian Shield. My name is Sterling. I'm your host. Mark Carney appeared on a podcast that is held by two of his close friends, or at least colleagues. And it was hard to watch, I'll be honest with you. I'll leave a link for it down in the description. You can try to get through it. If you can get through it without throwing up, I'll be surprised. I almost threw up in my mouth a couple of times. There was so much bias in it. There was so much hatred towards anybody that's not on the far left. There was so much patting each other on the back. Like, it was pretty obvious that these gentlemen have an agenda. They weren't necessarily looking for the truth. They were simply trying to tell you what you should believe based on what they want you to believe. And as you can appreciate, Mark Carney, again, says some things that were just shocking, like just completely not in touch with the reality of the world going on around us. Well, I'll let you hear it, then I'll break down for you why I think it's so stupid.
What is striking at the moment is that the business community in private is with me. The business community in public is pretty quiet. And they're 180 degrees in opposition to what the administration is doing, but they're not saying anything about it.
Oh, come on. Come on, Mr. Carney. Even you can't think that we don't know better than that. How stupid does this guy really think that we are, that we don't know that businesses, if they were upset with what Trump was doing, they would be calling to him. They don't need you to translate. They don't need to tell you one thing and then go ahead and pretend like it's different in public. The silence that's coming out of the company says everything. But let's just have a quick look, a little investigation into your claim that they are, in fact, secretly telling you that everything is the way that it was the whole time, that they're behind the carbon tax, that they are behind this new carbon tax that you want to put on their companies, that they don't believe in the plan of Donald Trump. 180 degrees, as you said, meaning the complete opposite of what Donald Trump is offering, what with the low taxes and the patriotism. So I went ahead and went out on the internet and I had just a quick little investigation because I knew what I was looking for, or I knew what to expect. One of the articles about Canada, BMO, the Bank of Montreal, National Bank, withdraw from the Banking Climate Alliance ahead of the Trump inauguration. That was January 17th, so that's not even 30 days ago. So I'm not sure that they're telling him in private that they support him. They seem to be going in the different direction. However, there might be more. There's other banks in Canada. Let's have a look. 5 of Canada's big 6 banks quit Global Climate Alliance. Strange. That was on the same day, the 17th of January. So on the 17th of January, all 5 of the top 6 banks in Canada had all pulled out of Mark Carney's Climate Alliance, which he set up through, he was in Glasgow and there was a whole bunch of WEF people behind it. So that's a weird thing, right? That's not saying nothing in public. That's in fact saying we are out. That's completely 180 degrees to what you're claiming. But maybe I misunderstood. Maybe it's not just Canada. Maybe he's looking for maybe he's talking about other markets. He's a globalist, a self-admitted globalist, quite proud of himself. And so maybe he's decided that it's better to deal with European banks or something. With JP Morgan gone, all major U.S. banks have now left the Global Climate Alliance. So there's one major bank in Canada left, according to that article, and there's none in the United States. Zero banks in the economy that Trump is kickstarting by offering low income taxes and putting tariff on everything that's coming into the country that's not made in the country. But Mark Carney would have us believe that privately, behind closed doors, when nobody can hear it and he can't prove it, they all support him and they're all against the big bad Trump. Because apparently every bank in the continent hates profit. But maybe I'm wrong again. I mean, he's got very strong ties to Europe. So let's give him the benefit of the doubt. Let's have a look. The central bank's green push hits a hurdle as the Fed drops out. So in Europe, the U.S. Federal Bank has decided that it also is leaving the climate alliance with all of the other European banks. So now that's Canada and the U.S. and a big hit to the European ideas because most of the European dollars are always weighted around the American dollar. So, and then I just said, well, let me have a look. Maybe there's a part I'm missing. And Google just says, as of January 6, 2025, Bank of America, Citigroup, Morgan Stanley have all left the alliance. This follows the departure of Wells Fargo, Goldman Sachs in December of 2024. Most recently, JP Morgan has also withdrawn from the alliance. So it would appear that not only is it's possible that Mark Carney's living in delusion land, that somehow all of these banks are pulling out of his climate alliance, and he believes that as a result of that, they're going to support his carbon tax. But when I hear Mark Carney and the Liberal Party trying to freak out over Donald Trump, I don't hear any of our businesses doing that. I don't hear the businesses of steel, especially, or any of the mining conglomerates complaining about it. Because what Trump said is if you make it in America, there's no big deal. And now they all have the opportunity to go to America. Land is cheaper. There's no carbon tax. In addition to that, there is enormous amounts of company taxes that are going to be lowered, federally at least. I mean, I get that there will still be state taxes, and so do companies. So right now, many of them are looking at places where the states are going to offer them the best deals. Pennsylvania already having an infrastructure for steel, because steel requires a couple of things outside of just having the mill. You need a lot of water, which Pennsylvania has, and you need a port to sail it out, which Pennsylvania has. So, I mean, they're called the Pittsburgh Steelers, right? For a reason. It's not because they steal stuff. It's because, that's steel in Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh is in Pennsylvania. And it sits on a giant river, and the reason that it's put there is because it's a great port, and it's a part of the story that actually triggered the French and Indian War, if I'm honest with you. I'll do a different video on that if you want. What I would have you look at right now is he's trying to tell the people that are behind him, because this podcast is for the people that are already in this is an echo chamber podcast. And he wants you to believe that because he's a businessman, he secretly has all of these people telling him one thing, but in reality, they're just waiting to pounce on Donald Trump. No, they're waiting to cash their checks. They are already asking themselves if they can afford that new place in Florida, where, of course, is also a Republican state with very few taxes. So I'm not sure that Mark Carney's words are honest. And do we want to begin? Do we want to talk about how many of these liberal far-left leaders are going to be lying directly to our face, pretending that it's the truth, and then ignoring us when we call them out on it, when we say to them, hey, that what you said wasn't true, and then all of a sudden they just completely ignore the question, and they take their media, which for all I know, Mark Carney has investments in all of the media, right? He has a holding company that might have much stock in many of these media companies. They will ignore the question, they will ignore the answer, and then they will just tell Canadians that if you don't like it, you're some sort of an ist or some sort of a phobe. It's the same thing that we've been dealing with now for 10 years. You would think that was bad enough, but the wheels really came off, and it was an hour long. I just pulled out a couple of really choice nuggets that I want all of you to sort of listen to, come right out of Mark Carney's mouth. I mean, they're coming right out of his own mouth.
People will charge me as being elitist or a globalist, to use that term, which is, that's exactly, happens to be exactly what we need. That, you can only believe so much in the free market if you're a tenured professor at Chicago or you're a lifelong politician, right? And he just sort of worships in that world. He defaults to the same solutions all the time.
Now, he said couple of very large things in that little clip. Initially, he says that I'm a globalist and it's exactly what Canada needs. It's the last thing that Canada needs. That's what got us into this mess. Talking about Ukraine and talking about how we have the G7 and how we have the credit rating and how we're dealing with companies all over the place. And how all of that thinking got us locked into the fact that we have one business partner, the United States of America, who does not like the liberal government. He said so right out loud. He doesn't agree with the liberal government. He doesn't like them as people. And now that that market is gone, our country is basically staring down the barrel of an economic destruction. And then he goes ahead and tries to slam and ridicule Pierre Poilievre for believing in free market. He, in fact, says that you're either a tenured professor in Chicago or you're a lifelong politician to believe in the free market. Now, Donald Trump is not a lifelong politician, and neither is the economist that won in Argentina. They both believe in the free market. The free market is exactly what the world needs. It's exactly what will stop the control of the government. You see, because what he means by not having a free government is communism, Marxism, fascism. He believes that if you give all of the control of the companies to the government, to him, that's going to be better than a free market where a person does what they want and just stays inside the local, state, or provincial regulations. He believes that by telling him and getting his single seal of approval that you will be able to start a company, that he can now tell you where you can build it, what you can build, what you can manufacture, what you do with your profits. He can tell you how much time your employers are supposed to work, what you can feed them for lunch, how many nets you have to put up to keep them from throwing themselves out the window, etc., etc., etc. That's the opposite of what he's calling a free market. This man who is a globalist and elitist, in his own words, who believes that somehow communism is the answer for Canada, that he would be he wants to take enact the Emergencies Act based on a threat that he wants you to perceive as coming out of Donald Trump. And he then wants to take away your liberties and your freedoms. And somehow he wants you to believe that inside of all of that, he's going to create a booming economy, because all of the socialist governments that have ever happened since Marx have all, no, actually, that's not true. They all have failed miserably. They are all in enormous debt, and they all have a dollar that's worthless. Now, we can look at the socialist republics of Central America, colloquially known as a banana republic, where the elitists make a lot of money and everybody else is dirt poor. I suppose there's that concept. Either way, neither of those ideas appeal to me as a Canadian and a believer in the free market. The free market is what gives us the middle class. They are people who have earned enough money to have their own stuff, their own property. Remember that. What he's actually saying against the free market is that he doesn't believe in the middle class. He believes in regulation. He believes in Big Brother looking down your neck. He believes in censorship. He believes in doing it only the way that he approves, which is why he spoke with such derision about the free market. You can only believe in the free market if you're a tenured Chicago professor or a lifelong politician. Well, I'm neither of those things, and I believe in the free market. And I'll tell you straight, Mark Carney don't impress me at all. The more I find out about the guy, the less I think he understands anything. I think he just seems like an accountant. He doesn't seem like he has a larger grasp of geopolitical, and he certainly doesn't seem to have a larger grasp of the people on the ground, like what people go through on their everyday. By contrast, Pierre Poilievre was born in a middle-class family, took the train to school, lived in an apartment with his dad. I'm not sure that there is a comparison between the two personalities, but I can tell you with absolute certainty that what this man just said about the free market and how he mocked it is exactly what they would say in, Cuba, China, places like that.
Series of insults that we're the 51st state and our prime minister is a governor, etc.
If we were to take nothing else from that statement, we would know one thing: that Mark Carney's too soft to deal with a guy like Donald Trump, because Donald Trump is New York talk, right? He talks like they do in New York, and everybody talks that way. Children speak the way that Donald Trump talks, because people in New York, they're like that. They're like people coming out of downtown Toronto. They're like people who don't pull any punches. Mark Carney and Justin Trudeau and the whole far left seem to have they seem to be quite wounded by a couple of jokes that were put out on the internet. Let's leave that aside, though. Let's leave the weakness of the character aside, and let's just look at something. Donald Trump said he's putting tariffs on Canada for anything that's coming out of Canada into the United States, and the entire far left has melted down. They are screaming about economic depression. They are talking about how that's going to destroy the country beyond repair. At the same time, Canada's central government, the federal government in Ottawa, has been first tied up for the first session of the year, right, with the documents that the Liberal government didn't want to surrender. And then it's been prorogued. And that doesn't seem to bother them at all. So here is our central government doing nothing for 6 months, 7 months, and nobody seems to be concerned about the state of the country. The government in Washington puts a couple of dollars on our products, and the entire thing melts down. I hate to break it to you, but we might not be part of the United States, but economically, we are already the 51st state, which is kind of a bummer because I feel like if we're going to join the States, we should do it, separately. Then Quebec can have their own country, but I suppose that's a different video. All jokes aside, what we're talking about is an economic tie that to the United States that it doesn't seem to be bothering Mexico, but it is bothering the Canadian politicians, people who have not worked in Ottawa for the whole year. I hate to break it to you, Mr. Carney, but if you don't understand that, then you are seeking the wrong job. Oh, the job of governor is what you're seeking. Obviously, I don't want to be the 51st state. However, with such a small economic switch, just a small tariff that was put on 12 countries at the same time, and only Canada's economy is facing collapse as a result. So that kind of is a strong indicator that we do not have the position economically that we desire, that we need to have. And it's the far left that got us there. It's the far left telling ourselves that if you have pride in your country, you're some sort of an ist or a phobe and trying to compare you to a guy with a funny mustache in Central Europe. Anyway, the podcast host there, one of Carney's good buddies, he made an interesting comment about inviting Pierre Poilievre onto the show. So let's just hear that for a second.
On the podcast recently, we put a shout out to Poilievre to come on and do an interview, and I can't believe that there won't be at least somebody in his team who's watching this interview, so I want to repeat that now.
Now, I watched this podcast, and I'm telling you, this 1 hour of this interview, which was really difficult, this guy needs to do a little bit of homework. If you want to get Poilievre, I'm sure you can talk to his people, like through email or what have you. He is the official leader of the opposition, after all. He probably has more than one way to get a hold of him. However, Pierre Poilievre routinely tears far-left extremist media to shreds. It's not once. I think I have 15 videos of him tearing the far-left media to pieces. I mean, in some cases, the CBC has sent 3-4 different people at him from different cities. They try to proxy sometimes. They're like, hey, if you're from Canadian Press, can you just ask him this question from the CBC? I mean, you're not prepared for the level of clever that Pierre Poilievre can have. I'm telling you, I watched this podcast. This guy here, I mean, he is pretty fragile. And I just feel like if he's going to call him on there just so that he can call him names or try to make fun of him or something equally ridiculous, that he should probably do a little bit of research and understand just how serious Pierre Poilievre can get when you talk at him like he's somehow, subhuman. But it's your podcast and you do as you like. I personally just a few minutes warning so I can pop the popcorn. As ever here on the Canadian Shield, I saved the best for last.
I honestly believe he disdains much about the country.
We will be a self-reliant, sovereign country that stands on its 2 feet. We will reward work, unleash entrepreneurs, harvest our resources, make our own goods, trade with each other, build homes for our youth, rebuild our borders and military, honor our history, and raise our flag. What binds us together? What binds us together is the Canadian promise that anyone from anywhere can do anything, that hard work gets you a great life in a beautiful house on a safe street, wrapped in the protective arms of a solid border defended by brave soldiers under a proud flag. To preserve that flag and its promise, we must work together, fight together, and win together. That is what it means to put Canada first.
Oh yeah, disdain. Yeah, no, I got a lot of impression of that from the stirring moments of some of his speech at the rally he held in Ottawa for Flag Day. 90 minutes they were up there. Millions of people have viewed it. By contrast, Mark Carney was on the podcast for Flag Day, and when the English host mocked him for having a flag in the shot, he said to the host, "Well, it's Flag Day here in Canada, so I had to have it in the shot." But he literally made fun of him for having a flag in the image. That's the kind of echo chamber Mark Carney spoke to on Flag Day, and Pierre Poilievre held a rally where he spoke to the people about his vision for Canada. Now, I wonder how long it'll take for the same podcasters to say that Pierre Poilievre has no plan. Well, I recommend that you listen to the 90 minutes that he spoke to the crowd in Ottawa on Flag Day, and you will get some understanding of his plan. The idea that Mark Carney would try to project his own disdain for Canada onto Pierre Poilievre is laughable. It has no merit. It has no basis in fact. And it's just like the same tactics we've been hearing from the very start. They got one playbook. First, you accuse them of exactly what you're doing. Then you tell them that everything they think of turns you into some kind of a phobe or an ist. And then they don't answer any questions and they run around screaming that they're the victim. Repeat. And of course, we can see what's done to the state of the world. We can see what's done to the state of not just the economy of Canada, but Austria, Germany, Sweden, Norway, England. That's just to name a few. There's more than that. The United States, Venezuela, Argentina. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. Only the free market is the answer. Only the free market will give you the middle class. And let's be straightforward. Middle class is a dream that many people have, in the sense that it gives them the independence that they like. It gives them a nice, comfortable home where they don't have to listen to their neighbor if they don't want to, but they can also talk nice to their neighbor if they choose to. They have their nice little place, and they have little weekend things, and it lives in the suburb, and it's a dream that only exists in the West, because only the West has the middle class. Every other culture is middle classes and doesn't exist. If it did, they wouldn't be scrambling over themselves to come to the countries that have it. They would simply try to get into the middle class in their own country. But they're crammed in. They live in shanty towns, and they live in favelas, and they look at Canadian and American television with dreams in their eyes. Mark Carney, however, wants to shut all of that down. He wants to be the only guy who decides, the czar of business. He wants to know what you're building, when you're building it, where you're building it, why you're building it, and he'll let you know in 6 or 8 months whether or not he approves of it. Meanwhile, Donald Trump's down in the south of us going, "Hey, come on in. If you make it here, I will give you an enormous amount of tax discounts. I will give you all the people you need to run the company, and I will help you in any way, shape, or form get it off the ground. And even if that just means calling the local alderman to make the connection so you guys can shake hands." Yeah, no, yeah, sure. All right, I'm going to wrap here. I want to thank you for listening. I'll talk to you next time.